And Vandana was working this area. Most of us didn't even know what is going on in Earth, Mother Earth. Nobody wants even thinking about the environmental issues or seed protection. She is the leader and she is the pioneer of this area. When I came first dealing with the food issue, it was 2005. But of course, I know her works quite a long time. It was very good for me to follow through her footsteps to make these issues to carrying in a different platform, which is United Nations. United Nations, as you know, is a big institution. We have some disappointments about the United Nations work, but also United Nations is doing good jobs, but the good jobs of the United Nations is not very well known by everyone, especially in the United States. So let me give me a little bit about why United Nations is dealing with this issue and what we are doing. The United Nations Human Rights Council has a special procedure program. This means every human rights have a special rapporteur, and they are dealing with these particular issues as an independent expert. We are special rapporteurs. I am not the only one, but I'm only one in the right to food. But there are many of the special rapporteurs, for instance, children, violence against women, water, health, and torture, freedom of speech. All special rapporteurs are dealing with these human rights violations around the world, and they go countries and they do the mission trips, they investigate specific countries, and then they bring these human rights violations to the United Nations, they bring their reports, and they expose what is going on in this area. So my work, which is this special rapporteurs appointed for 6 years, and after 6 years, some other expert comes and take the flag to go further, which is a good thing because it should not be a forever work. We can use our expertise and areas, some other areas, being an academic or some NGO person, to take this very impressive work to the next stage. So during this process, we deal with from the human rights perspective, right to food. And why human rights-based approach is important for food security and agriculture. That's why we are trying to do, because the system is, of course, big and important, and a technical side is very deep and complicated, and we have a lot of scientists, we have a lot of activists, and we have the knowledge. But how we make this knowledge to transform into human rights friendly politics. That's why we are trying to do, because what we are doing, we are protecting the human rights. When we are protecting human rights, we only first protect the most vulnerable in the world. Who are the most vulnerable? Children are the most vulnerable. Rural communities are most vulnerable. Indigenous peoples are most vulnerable. Some women around the world, I don't like to call women vulnerable, but women are needed more support for their work. So what we are doing, we are bringing this kind of system to food policies, to the governments, telling them this will be the better way to deal with these policies, because the most important thing in the human rights-based approach, we have to be part of the decision-making mechanism. What is our government is doing, we have to know that. We need the transparency, we need to be participating in the decision-making process, and we need to also make accountable our governments if they do something against this kind of important principles. So basically, the science is there, policy is there, what we are doing to make them, these policies, effectively implementable. Of course, this is not an easy way, like we say simply. A lot of governments are very resistant to this because they don't want that kind of variety of voices if it is not really perfect for their sort of short-term political interests. That's one thing. Another issue is corporations are very uncomfortable making the human rights friendly policies for the food and agriculture because corporations are extremely important in this area, like Vandana said, and it's becoming more and more under the control of the corporations. And when we say corporations, we're not talking about 100. We were talking about 10 maybe. Now they are merging. When they are merging, they make they understood it is better to look more comprehensive manner rather than dealing only one thing. So corporations understand everything before we understand. So if you really want to do a good policy, we should look at them, what are they doing? Because they have very sophisticated way to search the profit. It doesn't mean that searching the profit really bad thing. Of course, they will search the profit, but if governments and the civil society cannot really follow through what corporations is doing, if there is no regulation, if there is no accountability, then this policy becomes extremely deadly. So we are seeing right now, very simple example, what is happening, Monsanto, now of course Bayer, in relation to Roundup. Roundup is now banned most of the developed world, except United States. And actually, just last week, our gardener were spraying something, and I looked, what are you doing? I said, I don't know. They give me, I am doing this. And I looked at, it's a Roundup. You're not going to use anything this. I said, there is the only way we can buy in this country in Santa Barbara. So the issue is not only problem of the developing countries, because generally when we talk about the economic and social rights, the Western world makes these issues the problem of the developing countries. It is not only a problem of the developing countries. It's a problem of whole universe, whole country, whole world, and all together our lives. So what we are doing together in Human Rights Council or Special Rapporteur, we work with the NGOs very closely, we work with scientists very closely, and we work with some governments that are friendly to the human rights. There are not many, but enough governments that they respect human rights principles and try to protect. And also, very interestingly, governments always support human rights that other countries have a problem. Nobody would like to see their own problem. They always would like to see other governments' problems. So we have to find the governments that the food and agriculture policy is not their problem. Then they help you. They help to expose the other countries' problems. So this is what we are trying to do with our reports. And our reports are a kind of good information for NGOs, and good information for civil societies, and good information for next generation that they have to work on this issue. So I should not go further on that issue. It was a very good project when we were together with Vandana in Florence, and we had an excellent group of people. I learned a lot, especially some kind of special weeds that good for the people. I still remember the name of the, what was the name? The Italian agroeconomist supporting Senatore. So here is the case. Many issues right now about the gluten-free. And Salvatore, yes, he was doing. Apparently, many of the wheats, especially very old historical wheats, are has a very little gluten. So this gluten-free things actually is a very interesting thing. If you use the ancient flour, you don't have any problem of gluten problem. So, but the gluten-free finding is very difficult because now we don't have enough variety of seeds. So that's a very important thing that I learned from them, because we are international lawyers, we don't know all these things, but you really have to listen through the Vandana. We did learn a lot of these things. Thank you very much for listening to me.